Hey Ken, this is Greg. It's February 2nd, the year 2022. I wrote you yesterday, but we're expecting an ice storm starting at 7 a.m. Thursday morning, and it's going to last 24 hours. That's what the warning is listed for, till 7 a.m. Friday morning. So I would say the probabilities of us being out of school the next 2 days are strong. My intentions are to go ahead and take my camera home so I can continue videoing for you, these lessons. Today, I need to start, something I thought I had already covered yesterday, but my battery died on my video cam, and so it actually stopped in an opportune place. It stopped at the beginning of, chapter 15. We got through all 14, and yeah, it was chapter 15. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and start with chapter 15. Today in class, we got about halfway through chapter 16. They actually begged me to keep on reading because chapter 16 actually starts the trial. And so they were really kind of getting into it. They were getting absorbed in what was going on in the courtroom. But we haven't got to the most interesting parts yet by far. But I'll talk about that here, and you can probably deduce from what I've got written on the board how far along we got. So I want to start at chapter 15, which again I thought I had recorded yesterday, but again the battery died on my video cam, and so I'm just going to go ahead and start with that. I got into about 10-15 seconds before the video just stopped. What's happening there in chapter 15? It starts out, a group of men come to visit Atticus in the evening at his house, one of whom is Hecate. And the kids are, of course, they're curious about it, but they thought these people were not their friends. And the reason that they came was because Tom Robinson was being returned from I think it's Abbotsville jail, and this was a Saturday evening when they came to visit him. Tom was going to be returned on Sunday to the Macomb jail, and then the trial was going to begin on Monday. And I quizzed the kids about, why wasn't he kept in the jail all, for however long it was. And I had a few of them, came up with the most logical answer, but most of them, I don't know why they couldn't figure it out. And of course the answer is for his own safety. As I told them in class, if he would have been kept at the Macomb jail, there's a good possibility that a bunch of men would come and break in the jail and drag Tom out and take him out to the woods somewhere and lynch him. And so, my kids know what lynch means. I used it interchangeably with hanging, taking law into their own hands. We got into that. Tom is showing back up. It's actually his first appearance. This is the first time we've met him, and even though we don't get a picture of his face in this chapter, we do hear his voice. And
hey guys, sorry it's me again. Sorry about the confusion. We're going to go ahead and do the whiteout for tonight's game and say blast from the past for another game.
They just made this announcement about 5 minutes ago.
So show up and show out tonight at 7 for the varsity boys versus Jets. It's a whiteout.
I do not understand why this is a repeat announcement. They've already made this announcement once. Yeah, we've heard this one as well. Sadie Hawkins dance. At any rate, back to you.
$10 for an individual and $15 for a couple. So support your seniors.
All right. So after Atticus decides to leave in the evening, you recall this from the movie. Atticus decides to leave one evening. He takes a lamp with him that has a cord with it and everything, and he's going to go downtown. He gets it. I think he actually takes his car there. Well, about 10 o'clock or so, Jim decides he's going to go out and see where Atticus is, thinking he's downtown, maybe in his office. They go to Atticus' office, and Atticus is not there. And so they start walking back. I forget where they're heading to, but they have to pass the jail to get there. And they see the lamp out there on the sidewalk in front of the jail, and there's Atticus sitting in a chair reading the newspaper. And they haven't figured out yet why Atticus was there, but they figure it out here in short order when some other people show up. So as Atticus is sitting there reading his paper, 4 cars pull up, and they're older cars, older model cars, and like I think the book said, I could be wrong on this, there's like 2 men in each car, so there's a total of 8 men. And from where they were sitting, now Jim was ready to go home before these cars pulled up. He was satisfied that Atticus was okay. However, these cars pulled up, and then men got out. And where the kids, it was Jim and Scout and Dill, all 3 of them, where they were standing from or squatting from or whatever they were doing, they couldn't see faces. They were just shadows that they had. So Scout, the always impulsive Scout, she decides that she's going to run up to Atticus and find out what's how he's doing and everything. So she arrives in the group. The men are surprised, the men that are there, to take Tom and to take him out and lynch him. And they're kind of surprised, and Atticus is surprised, especially when Jim and Dill come up. And Atticus gives Jim an order. He says, Jim, you take Scout and Dill home. Do as I tell you. And Jim refuses, and Atticus tells him again, take them home. And Jim steadfastly refuses to do as he's told. Jim is smart enough to realize there's danger in all this. Scout doesn't. I don't know about Dill, but Scout doesn't really realize what all the danger is involved here. But Jim does, and he's refusing to leave his father. A discussion we had in class was, the implications of all that. If Atticus is refusing to surrender Tom to these men, and the men don't like it, and Mr. Finch, you know why we're here, you know what we're here for. Where is he, Mr. Finch? Is he in there? And Atticus said, yeah, he's in there, he's resting. And the men demand that that Atticus lets them take Tom Robinson, and he refuses. And it becomes apparent that bodily harm, or even death for that matter, could come to Atticus if he doesn't surrender Tom. And so I asked my kids, I said, why does Atticus want them to leave? And some of them said, well, they don't want to see their daddy get beat up, or it's past their bedtime, or whatever answer they came up with. And finally we just had a discussion about it. What are those men there to do? And of course my kids knew what they were there to do, and I said, what's going to happen to Atticus if he doesn't give him up? My kids came up with the right answer. I said, what about the kids though? If Atticus is in danger, what does that mean for the kids? And the answer is fairly obvious. If those men took Atticus and hurt him or killed him, who are the only witnesses? And of course it's the kids. Well, Scout is just looking around, and she sees Walter Cunningham, the dad, old Walter Cunningham. And she's just trying to be friendly. There's nothing ulterior motives about it. She, as she said in the story, she was told when you're around people and you're talking to them, talk about them and not about yourself. So she says, "Hey, Mr. Cunningham, how you doing, Mr. Cunningham?" And then she drops the bomb. "How's the entailment?" And of course, Scout doesn't really know what she's talking about here. And she's just trying to be polite and carry on conversations. All right, this hits Walter Cunningham like a ton of bricks. Says he got real silent and he looked down. He wouldn't even look at her. She thought something was wrong at this point, so she tried to continue to make conversation with him. And then a little bit later, she says, "Hey, Mr. Cunningham." Well, she started, I said, because he wouldn't talk to her. He said, "Don't you remember me? I'm Jean Louise Finch. Don't you remember me, Mr. Cunningham? You did business with my daddy, with Atticus." And Walter Cunningham, he makes no effort to respond to her. So Scout thinks that she has done something wrong. And so she starts it up again. "Mr. Cunningham, I go to school with your boy, with Walter. He's a good boy, Mr. Cunningham. He came home with us for lunch, one day. And we're good friends. He's a good boy, Mr. Cunningham. All right, this is piling on the shame to Walter Cunningham, and I'm sure the rest of those men had to feel uncomfortable as well. Walter Cunningham and these men are there to take Tom Robinson, to commit a crime, to take the law into their own hands, to hurt Atticus if necessary, and to hurt the children if they deem it necessary. And this little girl, this 8-year-old girl, is just talking to Mr. Cunningham, just striking up a conversation, and she is accidentally bringing up things that bring shame to him, and she just keeps on piling it on, you know? And then when it all got real quiet and everything, she tries to tell Atticus, I don't mean any harm by it. I didn't mean any harm, by what I said. I was just trying to tell Mr. Cunningham about entailments, and entailments are bad, but sometimes it takes a while to get through them. And then she drop kicks on them right here at near the end of her speech. And I'm looking in my book here. She says something that just puts the matter to rest. Well, Atticus, I was just saying to Mr. Cunningham that entailments are bad and all that, but you said not to worry. It takes a long time sometimes, and this is the phrase that I point out, that you all would ride it out together. All right, so Walter Cunningham and the rest of these men are being forced to see that Atticus Finch, the one who is their friend and who's always helped them in their needs, that he is, and he's willing to ride things out with them, that they're here to do him harm, and there's no reason why they should be harming him, and in reality, there is no reason why they should be there to take Tom Robinson out. In the next chapter, Atticus tries to explain all this, and basically what he says is, kids, these men are still our friends. They do things and think things that we don't think are right, but they're still part of our community. That's who we are. But then he makes, I think, a very good observation, and I've heard this at other places as well, other situations. I'm going to paraphrase this. It's not exactly what he said. People, individuals, usually act pretty good. Usually, not all the time, but they usually act responsibly and stuff like that by themselves. But when you get people in a mob, they will do things that they wouldn't normally do. And I'm pretty sure you understand that that's an accurate statement. All right, if you've seen things like on television where there's a mob gathered, people will tear up things and they'll try to hurt other people. They wouldn't normally do that if it was just a one-on-one. Now, sometimes people do. I get it. Sometimes people will do that, but this was a group of men who were, they're, as the old saying goes, they think there's safety in numbers, and they can't catch us all, and they can't prosecute us all, and stuff like that. So they think as a mob that they're going to be all right, and no one's going to charge them or catch them or anything like that. So anyway, Scout accidentally shames them all, and again, she talks about the entailment and that phrase that I just read to you. We'll all ride this out together, and makes them see that Atticus is not their enemy. He is not their enemy in the least, and he's probably been more than generous and more than kind with most of those men that were there. We certainly know he was with Walter Cunningham. So anyway, that's where Scout. Besides doing that, my kids got a kick out of the one place where the one man grabbed Jim, and Scout was upset by it. So she said, I meant to kick him in the shin, but my aim was a little high. As they just doubled over in pain. That one needed no explanation. My kids got a good chuckle out of that one. So anyway, that's it for chapter 15. Chapter 16, we're really getting into what I think is the best part of the book. It's the one that has most of the things that really pull the first part of the book together. And this is the part where the trial actually starts. It's a Monday morning. The kids are ordered by Atticus in the morning, do not go to town today. and what he meant by that was don't go down to the courthouse. The trial starts today. So they held off until noon, and then after he left after lunch, they didn't follow him. He didn't know they were coming, but they did go down to the courthouse. There was a stark contrast once again in the scene outside of the courthouse as there was in this before the trial. They even went inside. You had all the white people in their various social classes eating and drinking certain things. Off to the side, you had all the blacks. And this guy named Dolphus Raymond, which I'm not going to talk to you about this lesson about, but his name comes up in here. Well, I might talk a little bit about it. This man, he's a strange man for Macomb. He is a white man, but he has a black woman that he has sired offspring with. And I got a good conversation with the kids about this. We did actually read this today, so I'll talk about it. In Aunt Alexandra's world, the longer a person has been a resident of Macomb, and if they own land, the more importance their family has. So this Dolphus Raymond has owned a big chunk of land along the river for generations, for a long time. And in normal circumstances, so he's acceptable in Aunt Alexandra's world from that standpoint, and is accepted pretty much by everybody else, kind of. But he sired children. And the commentary that was made, I think Jim was telling Scout about it, the commentary was these children are half black and half white. And they have no place whatsoever in society. It says the blacks won't accept them because they're half white, and the whites won't accept them because they're half black. And another place it says, they won't accept any black that has a drop of black blood, Negro blood in them. And so these are just the offspring. They're in the twilight zone somewhere. They're like members of a leper colony. They're not accepted by any group of society whatsoever, and so they're kind of left on their own. Now, go back a chapter for when Dill shows up in they find him underneath Scout's bed and everything. And as Dill and Scout were talking, as he was ready to fall, they were both ready to fall asleep. They were talking. Dill was talking, trying to give a reason, a valid reason, to Scout why he left, and basically what he said is, "They don't want me. I have no value, and I don't count. I have no importance." And I talked about that yesterday. I hope it was on the video that I talked about yesterday. And that's kind of a basic human need. We need to. People need to have a sense of self-worth, and they need to have a degree at least of acceptance, either by their group or by society, and they need to have purpose and some reason for existing. And we talked about these kids who Dolphus Raymond fathered with the black woman, and how they're not going to be outcast pretty much for their entire lives. Again, they have nowhere to go to. Again, like I said earlier, the blacks won't accept them, the whites won't accept them because they're mixed. So anyway, that's not a point on my board, but that was a part of the chapter. And the stark contrast, how the blacks were segregated. And this is just a picture of the South then. The blacks were segregated, waiting outside the courthouse, and how they couldn't attempt even to go into the court when court was reconvening. They couldn't even attempt to go into the courthouse until all the whites had gone in. And then once they get in there, the blacks are confined to the balcony where no whites are, and the blacks had their own, like the Jim Crow laws, they had their own seating section, but it was removed, probably from their good hearing as well, and they were not allowed to mingle at all with the whites who got the downstairs seats. All right, so we start out this chapter with Hecate when Scout and the kids get in there, and they end up sitting in the black section up. The Reverend Sykes found them a place. I'm sure he ran other people out, for these white kids to sit there. And so Reverend Sykes, along with Jim, Scout, and Dill, got to sit in the balcony. Heck Tate is on the witness stand. He's the sheriff, of course. Heck Tate is on the witness stand when the kids get in there, and he's testifying to the sequence of events that transpired that night in November. He says he got a call from Bob Ewell, said a black man had come out and he caught a black man raping his daughter Mayella, caught him in the very act, according to Bob Ewell. And he said he could recognize the man right off, and he stood up and he pointed to Tom Robinson and said, that's the man right there. And so that, of course, caused a big sensation. That was the prosecutor, the solicitor, who asked for that story. Then Atticus got to question him, and he asked, the first question he asked, which is an obvious, today this would have been thrown out at this point right here. The case would have been thrown out at this point. He said, did you call a doctor? Was there any physical examination? Heck Tate said, no, I didn't need to. I just went down with Mr. Ewell and we got Tom Robinson out of his place where he lives and took him to jail. So Heck Tate didn't see any need to call a policeman. Of course, that'd be a no-no today. There'd be no evidence. There'd be no physical evidence. But Heck Tate did testify that she was beat up on her face and she had bruises on her arms. A black eye was coming, and she had marks around her neck, like choke marks. And Atticus, he quizzed him further. He said, which side of the face, did she get, was all beat up, or as Heck Tate called it, bunged up? Which side was all bunged up? And first of all, Heck Tate said the left side, but then Atticus clarified it. He said, is that the left side as you're looking at her, which would be her right side, or is that the left side as she's facing the same way as you are? And Heck Tate said, oh yeah, that makes a difference. He said it was her right side, that her face, and as he was looking at her, it was her right side, right, to his left hand, but it's her right side of her face. And that caused a stir. Atticus picked up something there. Of course, you've seen the movie, you know what it is. And even Jim picked up on it, that was something that had significance. And then they continued on, and finally, Atticus made him repeat it like 3 times. Then the next witness was Bob Ewell himself. I left my students with this question right here. First of all, his name, Robert E. Lee Ewell. That's not an accident. I know there's been thousands of Robert E. Lee so-and-sos in the South since the end of the Civil War. But why did she construct Bob Ewell like this? First of all, gave him the name, proud and strong and true Confederate name, believing in superiority of whites and that blacks aren't even really human beings. They're just creatures. They're just animals. All right. But not only that, his appearance. He came to court looking the best anyone had ever seen him. Somebody, the prosecutor, cleaned him up, shaved the back of his neck, shaved his face. The back of his neck was all red. His face was all red. He was uncomfortable in the nice clothes that he was wearing. His speech, he just talked like the backwoods person that he really is. He thought the solicitor, the prosecutor first asked him a question, is your name Robert E. Lee Ewell? And he said something like, you bet so, Captain, something like that. And at least a couple times the judge had to warn Bob Ewell about his speech. He was talking crudely about the alleged rape of his daughter Mayella. And so he got his name, what he looks like in his speech, and his disruptive behavior. And Harper Lee made Bob Ewell exactly like she wanted him to present an antagonist that is worthy of our loathing, worthy of our hate. And she really kind of went overboard, exaggerating, using hyperbole. She's exaggerated this man. And undoubtedly, in her mind, as she was writing this about Bob Ewell. She wanted to make the reader dislike Bob Ewell as much as possible and to make him as offensive and rude and crude and just ornery as he possibly could, so we could find, no positives about him whatsoever. And we already know that, including Atticus, pretty much everybody in town disliked the Ewells. Atticus had no kind words to say about him, and it's one of the only times that Scout could ever remember Atticus talking poorly about anyone at all. So that's where we left off today. And tomorrow in the reading, we're going to talk about the importance of the right side of her face being beat up. And I think Mayella doesn't come to the stand until the next chapter, and we'll meet her. And the way that she's constructed as well was on purpose, intentional. Ignorant, dumb as possibly could be, doesn't mean she doesn't have street smarts. Uneducated, no friends at all. But we'll get more into that tomorrow. So anyway, that's all I've got for today. Hope you're doing all right. Buckle down for the snow and ice that's heading your way as well. We haven't received confirmation yet that we're even going to be out, but everyone is assuming we're going to be out for the next 2 days. So Ken, talk to you tomorrow. Hope tomorrow's a better day than today was. See ya.